Right now, as you watch this video, a war is happening. Not a proxy war, not a threat, not a warning. A real war. Between the United States of America and Iran. Bombs are falling on Iranian cities. Iranian missiles are hitting American military bases across the Middle East. Oil prices have crossed $4.22 per gallon in America. The stock market has lost trillions of dollars. Schools have been destroyed. Hospitals have been bombed. A ceasefire was declared and then broken. And today, June 12, 2026, after more than 100 days, this war is still not over. And most people, even in America, still do not fully understand what happened, why it started, how it escalated, what a ceasefire that keeps falling apart actually means, and most importantly, what comes next. That is what this video is about. I am not going to give you Trump's version. I am not going to give you Iran's version. I am going to give you the human version, the version that tells you what this war is actually doing, to the Iranian mother whose child's school was bombed, and to the American family paying $4 for a gallon of gas, and to the oil worker in Saudi Arabia who got hit by an Iranian missile while going to work. Because this war is not just a geopolitical story. It is a human story, and it is not finished yet. Let me take you through everything, from the very beginning. To understand why this war happened, you need to go back years, because this war did not begin on February 28, 2026. It began building for decades. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, when Iran's government was overthrown and replaced by religious theocracy, America and Iran have been enemies. America imposed sanctions that slowly strangled Iran's economy. Iran built nuclear weapons in defiance. America threatened military action. Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which 1/5 of the world's entire oil supply flows every single day. For decades, it stayed a Cold War. Threats, sanctions, proxy conflicts through other countries like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen. But never direct war. The immediate concerns leading up to the 2026 Iran war included Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missiles, its military reach in the Middle East region, and failed attempts to renegotiate a nuclear deal after the collapse of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear agreement. Then came June 2025. The 12-day war. Israel and Iran exchanged massive missile strikes for 12 days. The United States under Trump launched strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran backed down. A ceasefire was reached. The world breathed a sigh of relief, but the underlying causes never went away. Iran's posture was in a weakened state after years of sanctions. Recent destabilizing protests, damage inflicted during the 12-day war with Israel in June 2025, and the diminished position of Iran's allies during the Israel-Hamas war. Given Iran's weakened position, the United States and Israel calculated that they had a greater opportunity to advance their objectives through military means than by diplomatic means. This is a crucial sentence. Read it again. The United States and Israel looked at Iran, weakened, economically broken, its people rising up against their own government, and they decided this was the moment to strike. Not to negotiate, to strike. On the evening of February 27, 2026, U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee sent an email to embassy staff in the region. The email said, "If you want to leave, do so today." At 2038 UTC on February 27th, U.S. President Donald Trump gave the order to proceed with Operation Epic Fury. Operation Epic Fury. That is the name they gave to the bombing of Iran. On February 28, 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces launched nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours, targeting Iranian missiles, air defenses, military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, and command centers across the country. 900 strikes in 12 hours. By the end of February 28th, the conflict had claimed at least 201 lives in Iran with 747 injured, including the devastating strike on a girls' school in Manab that killed 85 students. 85 students in one school on the first day. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched large-scale airstrikes on Iran. The strikes targeted Iranian nuclear facilities, military leadership, and infrastructure. And in those strikes, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, was assassinated. The supreme leader of Iran, the man who had controlled every aspect of that country for over 30 years, was killed by American and Israeli bombs in a single night. Khamenei's death triggered an election for a new supreme leader. Under the terms of Iran's constitution, an interim leadership council was established on March 1st to exercise the functions of Iran's head of state, the head of one of the most powerful nations in the Middle East. Gone, and the entire structure of Iranian government suddenly in chaos. Iran's response was immediate and massive. Beginning at 0905 UTC, Iran launched ballistic missiles toward Israel and several Gulf states in retaliation. At 9:26 UTC, a missile struck the U.S. Navy 5th Fleet Service Center in Bahrain. Saudi Arabia reported intercepting and destroying 4 ballistic missiles targeting Riyadh, along with a drone attack on an eastern gas facility. In response, Saudi Arabia expelled Iranian diplomatic staff, ordering them to leave within 24 hours. The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil passes daily, was effectively closed to commercial shipping, triggering an immediate global energy crisis. In one single day, the world changed. The supreme leader of Iran, dead. The world's most important oil waterway, closed. American military bases across the Middle East under missile attack. The global economy in shock. Brent crude oil rose 66% from $57.10 before the war to a peak of $94.65 just 1 week later. The Strait of Hormuz throughput fell approximately 35% at the height of disruption, affecting roughly 6.2 million barrels per day of normal flow. And this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the world had seen in decades. When Israeli jets struck the South Pars gas complex near Asaluye, they hit more than pipes and compressors. They struck the single piece of infrastructure most essential to Iran's ability to function, a field that provides 75% of Iran's domestic gas supply and powers roughly 80% of the country, 75% of Iran's entire domestic gas supply. Gone in a single strike. Imagine waking up tomorrow and 75% of your country's gas was gone. No heating, no cooking, no electricity, hospitals running on emergency generators, factories shut down, ordinary families sitting in the cold. That is what happened to 90 million Iranians. Iran launched ballistic missiles and drones against U.S. military bases across the region. A dozen Americans were wounded when a ballistic missile hit Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Iranian missiles and drones targeted the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. In Saudi Arabia, Iranian strikes targeted oil refineries. 2 civilians and 2 U.S. soldiers were killed. 29 American service members were wounded. 2 aircraft were destroyed and 5 more were damaged. Iran launched a series of ballistic and drone attacks against the United Arab Emirates, targeting American assets and bases. 3 foreign workers from Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh were killed. 58 others were injured. Pakistani workers, Nepali workers, Bangladeshi workers, people who came to the Gulf to earn money to send home to their families, killed by missiles fired in a war they had nothing to do with. This is what war does. It does not stay inside the borders of the countries fighting it. It spreads. It hits everyone. The Houthi movement in Yemen, operating under Iranian guidance, announced it was resuming targeting of vessels in the Red Sea in solidarity with Iran. One analyst described it as pricing 2 choke points simultaneously, calling it the worst-case scenario for European energy security. 2 of the world's most critical shipping routes, the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, both disrupted at the same time. The White House announced an emergency release from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, 30 million barrels over 30 days. The International Energy Agency coordinated with member nations for an additional 30 million barrels. But Brent crude still stood at $88.40, 55% above its level before the war began. Even emergency oil releases could not stop the global economic damage. Now let me tell you what this war has done to real human beings in Iran, because this is the story the Western media has almost completely failed to tell. By mid-May 2026, U.S. bombings had destroyed 22 schools and 17 healthcare facilities in Iran, and had killed more than 1,700 civilians. 22 schools, 17 hospitals, destroyed. These attacks seemed in line with Trump's threat to bomb Iran back to the Stone Ages, and with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's call for the U.S. military to engage with maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Those are the actual words used by the U.S. Secretary of Defense to describe how to fight this war. When a journalist asked Hegseth whether attacking civilian infrastructure, including transportation, electricity, and water, would amount to a war crime, he dodged the question entirely. The Secretary of Defense of the United States, asked directly whether bombing civilian electricity and water would be a war crime, refused to answer. According to verified reports, 3,468 people have been killed in Iran. 1,221 of them were military personnel. 1,701 of them were civilians. 714 remain unclassified. 26,500 more have been injured. 1,701 Iranian civilians killed. Each of them had a name, a family, a life, a dream, and those are only the verified numbers. Due to internet blackouts and restrictions on daily life, independent verification of casualties has been nearly impossible. Civilians experienced mass displacement, infrastructure damage, internet blackouts, and restrictions on daily life. Reports indicate deteriorating humanitarian conditions, increased repression, and limited access to basic services. Civilians have suffered devastating health and environmental costs, from mass displacement and polluted air and water to long-term health risks for future generations. The humanitarian consequences of this war should not be understood as isolated incidents of collateral damage, but as the culmination of decades of economic strangulation, authoritarian rule, and military destruction. Even before the 2026 war, Iranian civilians were already burdened by sanctions, inflation, repression, and declining living standards. The conflict has transformed those vulnerabilities into real hazards. Since the war started, we have seen children killed in their classrooms, hospitals rendered inoperable, millions displaced from their homes, and growing risks of hunger and the collapse of the health system. Think about what that means for an ordinary Iranian family right now. Before this war, they were already suffering. 40 million of them were living in absolute poverty. Their currency had already lost 90% of its value. Their medicine was already scarce. Their young people were already unable to find jobs. Then their supreme leader was assassinated. Their government is in chaos. Their gas supply was 75% destroyed. Their schools are being bombed. Their hospitals are being bombed. The internet keeps going dark. And they do not know from one day to the next whether their neighborhood will be hit tonight. The war caused damage to numerous historic and cultural sites across Iran. Thousands of years of Persian civilization being destroyed. And here is the deepest tragedy of all. For years, the Iranian people fought against their own government. They took to the streets in December 2025. They demanded freedom. Thousands of them were killed by their own government in January 2026. And then, just 6 weeks later, the very government that had been killing them was now supposedly being bombed on their behalf. The Iranian people are trapped between two forces that both claim to be acting for their benefit. Their own government, which has been killing them for decades, and the United States, which is now bombing their schools. There is no good side for an ordinary Iranian family. There is only survival. Now let us talk about what this war is doing to Americans. Because this war is affecting American lives too, in ways that most Americans did not expect, and many still do not fully understand. Petrol prices surged to $4.22 per gallon for regular fuel, compared with $2.98 per gallon on February the 28th, the day the U.S. and Israel first struck Iran. That is a 42% increase in 100 days. For many Americans, the biggest impact of the Iran war is at the gas station, where average prices are up over $1 per gallon since the conflict started. Summer travel is also growing more expensive as airlines hike ticket prices and introduce bag fees to help offset the cost of jet fuel, which is up more than $2 a gallon. You want to drive to visit your family this summer. It costs more. You want to fly. It costs more. You want to buy groceries. It costs more. Everything costs more. The Consumer Price Index hit an annual rate of 3.8% in April, its highest level in almost 3 years. Folks at middle income or lower income spend a bigger proportion of their income on goods and services each month than people at higher levels of income. They spend more of their income on housing and food, and the prices of these have been going up by a lot. This is the quiet economic violence of war. Not bombs, not missiles, but a slow, invisible squeeze that makes every ordinary American slightly poorer, every single day. Trump's war in Iran is costing the U.S. economy 10,000 jobs a month, according to Goldman Sachs. 10,000 jobs every single month, gone. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ are down 4.5% and 7.1% respectively since hitting record highs on June 2nd. If you have a pension, a retirement fund, any savings in the stock market, they are worth less today than they were 10 days ago. Because of this war, a survey conducted in early May found that Americans concluded the impact of the war was negative for the U.S. cost of living at 86%, international relations at 72%, overseas reputation at 72%, and national security at 65%. 86% of Americans think this war is making their cost of living worse. And yet, the war continues. On the American military side, 15 U.S. soldiers have been killed and 543 military personnel wounded since the war began. 15 American soldiers dead, 543 wounded. Each of them was someone's son or daughter, husband or wife, parent or friend. They signed up to serve their country, and they are dying in a war that 86% of their fellow Americans think is making their lives worse. If this video showed you something the headlines missed, please share it. Send it to one friend. Show it to one family member, because awareness is always the first step. And yes, please subscribe and hit the bell icon, because in the next video, I am taking you somewhere you probably never even thought about. A story that will shake you to your core. Until then, take care of yourself and keep thinking.